Ordinarily, the first Sabbath of the month is devoted to a series that we identify as Watch, Pray, and Be Ready. But this particular month has 5 Sabbaths in it. And last week we had the joy of celebrating the Lord's Supper together. I'm silencing mine. I invite you to do the same. And so I decided to shift the first Sabbath of the month to the second in order to retain the consistency of our Watch, Pray, Be Ready series. And those of you who have been here for the last year and a half know that we have been focusing on current events the first Sabbath of the month since January of 2022. And today, watch, pray, be ready. It's a little bit covered up because of a transition that took place in cyberspace. Playing with dragons. 2 stories. 2 stories. Tales of the Kingdom, a 3-part series, is an allegory that is similar to the great controversy theme, which we know quite well in our Seventh-day Adventist community. Tales of the Kingdom features the king of the kingdom who is countered by the evil enchanter. The stories occur in the setting of the enchanted city as well as Great Park. Action, intrigue, and danger follow Scarboy, a primary character wherever he goes, especially in Enchanted City, where the imperfect are cast away and orphans are enslaved. Scarboy manages to escape the evil enchanter to safety in Great Park, but he has yet to confront his greatest fear, and he will need enormous courage to conquer it. The trilogy conveys values and virtues such as honesty and compassion, loyalty, friendship, and perseverance. Another character in the Tales of the Kingdom series is Amanda, Princess Amanda. In the chapter Princess Amanda and the Dragon, Amanda experiences firsthand what seems to be rather innocent initially, but then becomes life-threatening. The chapter begins. Dragons in the sky are the first sign of spring in Great Park. The children come, baskets in hand, eager for dragon egg hunts. It's an allegory, okay? They race each other, laughing and breathless to see who will reach a clutch of dragon eggs first. They yell and hoot when they find their treasure. Dragon eggs, they cry. Echoes back and forth across the lake. Dragon eggs. Now, children know that they are forbidden to keep dragon eggs because a dragonette soon hatches from the egg and it achieves full growth 6 months later. The baby dragon's scales harden. It begins to breathe fire. At first, there are short blasts of warm air, but then later, great searing torches of flame. A sign at the lake reads, "It is forbidden to keep dragon eggs." But Amanda disregards the sign, choosing to keep an egg, hiding it in the hollow of a mighty oak. And soon the egg rattles and cracks. The little dragonette, cute as it can be, pecks its way out of the shell. It wobbles to the side of a tree, bumping its head. And Amanda laughs. Isn't it so cute? I must take you to caretaker, Amanda says out loud. He will know what to do about surprise hatchlings. But the little beast looks at her, turning its brown eye upon her, and a great tear drops out of its eye onto its little dragon breast. Amanda began to love the baby dragon. Though she knew it was forbidden, she kept the little dragonette for a pet, just for a little while. Perhaps I can tame it. Weeks, months pass. Amanda and the growing dragon play in the meadow and in the forest. Amanda even rides the dragon as it takes to flight. But the day comes when the dragon turns on Amanda. The huge beast sits waiting for her. Its long tail sweeps slowly from side to side. A claw on one paw flexed, tearing thatch and soil beneath. A thin, wet trickle drips out of its mouth, down its jaw. Yellow light gleams from its eyes. The dragon had become cunning. Why had she not foreseen this? She had been told, "Dragon, you must go. Dragons are not allowed in Great Park. You are too big for my den. Your breath is too hot. Fly away, dragon." But the dragon just leers at her. It hunched like a cat on the prowl and moves closer and closer to her. It swept its tail, which quickly covered the distance between them. Amanda hopped over it, and then she hopped over it again. It raised its head, blowing a hot flame on the grass behind her. She could hear the vegetation crackling. She could feel it beginning to burn. She turned and stamps out the fire. The dragon breathes again, more fire. Her heart fills with terror. One small princess cannot put out all the fires that one large dragon starts. 2 stories. That's story number 1. Now story number 2. Story number 1 was an allegory, fiction that represents reality. Story number 2 is not an allegory. It's reality. In his book, Letter to the American Church, author Eric Metaxas reveals the haunting similarities between today's American church. And when we say American church, we're talking about the church in general. The haunting similarities between today's American church and the German church of the 1930s. I recently read Letter to the American Church while we were away. It was published in 2022. Now, Metaxas is also the author of a biography, Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Martyr, Prophet, Spy. And it was originally published in 2010. I read Metaxas' biography of Bonhoeffer, that is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, 640 pages. I read it some years ago. Here is a portion of the overview of the biography of Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Martyr, Prophet, Spy. As Adolf Hitler and the Nazis seduced a nation, bullied a continent, and attempted to exterminate the Jews of Europe, a small number of dissidents and saboteurs worked to dismantle the Third Reich from within. One of these was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a pastor and an author who exhibited incredible moral courage in the face of monstrous evil. Metaxas, in his biography, presents an account of Bonhoeffer's life, including Bonhoeffer's heart-wrenching decision to leave the safe haven of America to return to Hitler's Germany. Bonhoeffer's involvement in the famous Valkyrie plot and in Operation 7, the effort to smuggle Jews into neutral Switzerland. And it reveals his lifelong commitment and dedication to sharing the tenets of his faith. Because of his voice, because of his influence, and because of his engagement, Bonhoeffer was executed by the Nazis on April 9, 1945. World War II in Europe, or as we know it, VE Day, is May 8, 1945. Bonhoeffer executed on April 9. The war ends on May 8. 1 month from the close of war. Decades ago, I read one of the works of Bonhoeffer himself, The Cost of Discipleship, from which one of Bonhoeffer's most memorable statements is this: when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Now that statement is based upon Jesus' words that we find in Mark 8. Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. Now with that background, let's return to Letter to the American Church, published in 2022. Here are some highlights. On November 6, 1932, at the age of 26 years, Bonhoeffer preached the Reformation Day sermon in the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church in Berlin. It was the most prestigious church in all of Germany. Though only 26 years old, he was already recognized as a theological prodigy. Now, Bonhoeffer was a devoted Lutheran Christian, and he knew that the fiery Church of Luther, whose legacy they were celebrating that day, had long since disappeared. The church in Germany had been replaced by a form of religion, which some assess to be Christianity without Christ. At the same time, Bonhoeffer had unusual insight and foresight, seeing where Hitler was headed. Nobody else could discern this. Seemingly nobody else could discern this at the time. He saw that Germany was trending toward a very destructive form of National Socialism. Bonhoeffer felt compelled to help others see that Hitler's brand of German nationalism was a wicked perversion of healthy patriotism. And Bonhoeffer knew, not even 30 years of age yet, that the German church was not able to stand up against Hitler. As 1933 wore on, the main battle lines in the German Christian community were shown to lie between the devotedly pro-Nazi Deutsche Christian Church, which zealously wished to help Luther form and oversee a national Third Reich church, on the one side. That was the one side. And then on the other side was what is called in English the confessing church. The confessing church. The confessing church declared itself to be free from Nazi influence and submitted only to God. The confessing church drafted and published a statement called the Barmen Declaration, asserting that the state could not control the church. Metaxas observes, what is shocking to us today is that most pastors in Germany were not willing to sign the Barmen Declaration. Either they were not thinking clearly, or they were thinking clearly, but simply did not have the courage to act on what they knew to be true. Perhaps they opted to just kind of sit on the sidelines and do nothing and see which way is the wind going to blow here. It is estimated there were 18,000 pastors in Germany in the 1930s. 3,000 were decidedly in support of Hitler. 3,000 were decidedly opposed to Hitler. 12,000 were in the middle. In other words, they simply sat by, attempting to stay neutral, or so it seemed. Metaxas observes that if another 3,000 or 6,000 pastors had stood with the confessing church, the Nazis, according to Metaxas, would not have been able to prevail. The church had great cultural power in Germany. So when it balked and chose not to use its voice, its influence, it doomed the entire German church and the nation. In considering the blood of the millions murdered in the Holocaust, in considering the estimated total of 75 to 80 million who died in World War II, Metaxas asks the question, is their blood in part on the hands of 12,000 pastors and their parishioners who chose to remain silent? Now, that may be a hypothetical question, but then again, it may not. The words, silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act, are the penetrating, convicting words that grow out of this horrible chapter in the history of the human race. So what is the point of Letter to the American Church? It is a call to speak up and act. Before Bonhoeffer, there was one who gave dire warnings to a nation. To his own people, Jesus told the story of the vineyard owner and the vine dressers. The vineyard owner who planted a vineyard and he leased it to vine dressers. Then he went into a far country, and when vintage time drew near, he sent his servants to the vine dressers that they might receive its fruit. And you know the story. The vine dressers took his servants. They beat one, killed one, stoned another. Again, he sent other servants, more than the first, and they did likewise. And then last of all, he sent his son, saying, they will respect my son. But when the vine dressers saw the son, they said among themselves, this is the heir. Come, let's kill and seize his inheritance. So they took him and cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. Jesus then asks his listeners, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those vine dressers? Jesus was a master at setup. They said to him, "He will destroy those wicked men miserably and lease his vineyard to other vine dressers who will render to him the fruits in their seasons." And Jesus agrees. "Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to a nation bearing the fruits of it. And whoever falls on this stone will be broken, but on whomever it falls, it will grind him to powder." And when the chief priests and Pharisees heard his story, Matthew comments that they perceived that he was talking about them. Duh! When Jesus went into the temple, wielding a whip of cords, overturning the tables of the money changers, and crying out, "Take these things away! Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandise." Was he not challenging the establishment? Was he not speaking up against the religious and the political structures of the day that violated his Father's design? Before Bonhoeffer, there was one who gave dire warnings in the shadow of a very prestigious religious building. In reference to the temple, the magnificent, beautiful temple, Jesus said, "Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." And in the same time of teaching, he went on to state, "When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand," adds Matthew, "then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." Now the dragon had attempted to deceive Jesus, as you recall, offering him an easy route. "Just bow down to me, Jesus, and I will give you what you came for. I will convey to you the kingdoms of this world." But Jesus did not buy into that deception. Jesus spoke up, he acted, and it got him crucified. The dragon attempted to devour him for good, but righteousness prevailed because justice, cosmic, universal justice, had been affirmed and demonstrated in the cross of Christ. Our cultural context is increasingly complex and complicated. The cultural political left is godless, redefining morality so-called. If one does not agree with them, one is labeled as a bigot or hateful or both. And the cultural political right is desperate, filled with fear and disgust at the attempted overturning of centuries of moral foundations. We could spend the next 30 to 45 minutes looking at specific examples of what I have just said. The voices, the issues in the arena of gender identity and sexuality are mind-boggling. They are astonishing. Much of corporate America, at least for the time being, has sold out, has capitulated to the LGBT arena. It's not just Target and Budweiser. They are not the only ones. And they are doing this because of CEI, Corporate Equality Index, which is sort of a woke report card published by the far-left human rights campaign that can earn companies lucrative financial commitments from woke investment banks. The abortion controversy is ongoing. What is paramount? Is it the rights of the unborn? Or is it the so-called rights of the woman who is carrying a life within her? So much depends on how one defines what is the life within the womb. And now that the COVID-19 pandemic is mostly in the rearview mirror, it has come to light that we were lied to a lot. Right? The World Economic Forum continues to publish their agendas for 2030 and beyond. We are called to think, to pray, to speak, to act. Rather than being a part of the 12,000 who just kind of sit on the side and twiddle one's thumbs and see which way the winds are going to blow, based upon the example of Jesus, based upon the courage of others, not only Bonhoeffer, but others who have preceded him, who have worked tirelessly to rectify cultural issues that were exploitive and damaging to the human race. We are called to speak and act in alignment with the principles that honor God as creator and Jesus as the one who was willing to speak out against the hypocrisy of his day. We are called to speak to our children about God's design for sexuality. In reality, we are forced to speak with our children now because the culture is already speaking to them, requiring from us a response. We need to help others consider that if their thoughts and feelings are leading them in a path not designed by the Creator, that it is possible to change one's thoughts and feelings. In the larger conversational arenas regarding 52 genders and more, or non-binary identities, one has observed this hypothetical. If your daughter thinks that she is a mermaid, are you going to affirm that by taking her to the beach and dropping her off in the ocean? No. You're going to help her understand in her thoughts and in her affections, her priorities, that she's not a mermaid. I find it interesting and revealing that most of the testimonies of those who were once in a same-sex life but now have walked away from that, and there are those who do. They are pursuing a Genesis 1 model, that those who were there but no longer are there, but now are in alignment with God's design. They are older. No, they're not the 18-year-olds or the 25-year-olds. They're the 45-year-olds and the 50-year-olds because they have been there and done that and have discovered it didn't speak with the reality of which they once were thinking. It is the older persons who are detransitioning as best they can. Now, my purpose in this message is to stir us to think, stir us to pray, stir us to speak up and to act, because these issues are not just out there in the larger culture. They are also knocking on the door of our faith community. I could cite examples of recent publication, but I won't. Revelation 14:6, a passage of Scripture with which we are very, very familiar, states that in vision John saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth. To every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment has come, and worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water. Our end time message, our appeal is a message of hope and healing in the gospel which provides forgiveness of sin and acceptance with God through Jesus as our atoning sacrifice, our high priest and our returning king. And the gospel of Jesus also includes His words, go and sin no more. Our end-time message, our appeal on behalf of Revelation is to worship the Creator. Yes, worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. But also worship Him who created us in His image, male and female. We cannot play with dragons. We cannot pretend that the dragons are only out there. Our safety is to fully surrender and embrace our Creator and our Savior, Jesus the Lamb. Our calling is to speak and to act to honor Him. How will we respond in a context of increasing cultural complexity? As our praise team comes forward at this time to lead us into our garden of prayer, I invite you to open your heart with vulnerability to what the Spirit is telling you at this moment.